Thank you all for being here. I know this is the last session of the conference, and we're the only thing between you and the ice cream socials. So we plan to be very fun, interactive, energetic, and we hope that you find a lot of value in this session. So my name is Jim Breen. I am the Director of Global Learning for InterSystems, and it's great to be here today. So we have some wonderful panelists that I think you'll find very interesting. So we're going to be talking about uncovering and accelerating value through collaboration. So why don't we start by having our panelists introduce themselves with their name, the company, and the role that they hold. So Chi, shall we start with you?
Hello, my name is Chi Wynn-Reddig, and I am Chief Technology Officer of Lead North.
I'm Jenny Ames, and I'm Manager of Online Learning Content at InterSystems.
Hello, folks. Art Derrick, and I'm the Head of Customer Success Management for InterSystems.
So we have 3 mics for 4 people, so you'll see us passing a lot. When you ask a question, if you could be loud, that would be great, because we'd like the questions recorded. And if not, I'm happy to give you my mic. I can move around pretty easily, so we'll do that. So Chi, you were really instrumental in how this panel really came into being. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, and how did that happen?
Well, first thing I want to say is, and this might be a bit of a confession, I'm actually super surprised that this proposal was accepted for a global summit. And the reason why is, and I've been to several global summits, and it's so much technical knowledge. And even at this global summit, we could see it's the new features, it's AI, it's these exciting projects, and it's very techy, and I love the tech. But when I proposed this, I was thinking about kind of, as a partner, an InterSystems partner, we work with implementations and integration, and there's really a very deep human component and a collaborative component. And so I'm like, oh, this is the first time I've proposed a talk, and I'm going to propose something that seems so soft. I don't like the word soft skills, right? But it's talking about the soft skills that are involved in implementation in a very hard tech sort of conference. And what inspired me was just in the last project, we were working with Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, and they have many people who were hitting this technology for the first time, doing interoperability for the first time. And in order to do this in the time span, in less than a year, we went from 0 to live in production. They really did leverage things like learning services and working really closely with our team. And that's why this idea of like, what is the collaborative component behind the technology, or actually not behind, intertwined with the technology that leads to success and customer engagement, and how do you get to it fast, really, within less than a year, a really complex project.
You talk about those soft skills, anyway, and how important they are in a technical, environment. And we talked about how you collaborated with Jenny's team. So Jenny, how did you collaborate? Like, how does learning services content come into play in that collaboration and really uncovering and accelerating value?
Yeah, well, I believe in this ecosystem. We're all fairly lean in the way that we work, and resources are tough. And so how do we, together as an ecosystem, drive things forward better and faster? So I've been super grateful to work with Chi and some of our other partners. And there's really 2 ways that I see learning services partnering with organizations, our partners and our customers. And that first one is we do regular connections. So with several of our partners, happy to connect also with customers to create custom learning plans and really help to streamline that onboarding process, streamline the continuous learning process. It's not just a one-time thing, but this it's a lifelong learning, right, journey. So that partnership. And then we also really focus on creating the building blocks that empower our customers. And so those building blocks then she can take, and her team could go and onboard or learn the next new feature. We have a commitment of creating content for all of our new features and products. Or she could use it with her customers. And so we're equipping her team to do the best that they can. And of course, we are not just looking at our partners. We have to look at all of our stakeholders. And I know Art here is one of our other stakeholders too. We need to make sure that we're looking across the board and finding what are those commonalities that we can really focus on to have the biggest impact in helping all of our stakeholders. Yeah.
Let's hear a little bit about Art. So when we talk about stakeholders for learning services, it's not just outside the company, but it's as well as inside the company. We educate our folks inside as well as outside. And Art, you are it's really a new department that came into being just less than a year ago, I believe, the Customer Success Management
Yes.
team. So could you talk a little bit about, how that came into being, what it's about, and how it really feeds into accelerating value?
Sure. Thank you for that. Great introductions, by the way. Thank you for that setup. So for customer success, you've all been at InterSystems Global Summit before, and then even day one. So that term is in our mission statement, right? So customer success is not new to InterSystems. However, what has been new and what we've added to is putting in place a customer success management function that has a professional focus on ensuring current customers are adopting and gaining measurable value from what they already own as a function that previously didn't exist. It was more fragmented around different roles. Previously, there was actually a role called adoption management, which was, I think, a starting point for that, project by project. But the mission we have now is broader than that, and it is aligned with customers. Let's say day one, we would be involved from day one throughout a customer journey, along with collaborating with professional services if they're involved, in learning services, and partners we work with like Lead North within our company, but also partners of customers. But also we have customers that we're working with now that are like 5 years into the partnership. So we're working with customers that have been around for a while, but haven't had this function applied to them. So it's a relatively new function for us. Let's say 4 or 5 months in, working with about 30, 35 customers at this point in North America, mainly end user healthcare, payer, provider, payvider, some HIEs. And the role also does require a lot of collaboration, with the account executive, sales engineer, learning services, support, product management, product engineering, product. So we're in the middle of that, and we're using it to add to what the customer already gets, but it's a lifelong journey, and there's no charge for this. It's part of how we would like to manage customer relationships on an ongoing basis, especially for new customers, but also for many current customers.
Great. So how do we see that playing into, like, the theme of this is uncovering as well as accelerating value. So how do the things that each of you do play into this theme? Like into what Art does, into what learning services does, and then the commitments you have to your customers?
I think in terms of the customer and uncovering and sort of the value there, we start on a project, and I think what will kill any project is silos, data silos, right? The coordination and just like the not knowing, the amount of churn you get when you make assumptions. And in terms of uncovering, what we do is we were involved with the customer from the beginning. Before things were looking polished, before things were even working, we were involved in conversations, and this was built into the structure of the project. We have weekly working sessions, we called them, and then this was the customer that was particularly engaged and looking to learn. But I think they all are, because you've just bought on this huge, complex package framework, Iris, and you're looking to figure out what we can do now with it at the customer site. And so we uncovered, and they uncovered, a lot of what the product can do, what they needed, and how they have everything that they need already there. They just need to be guided to do it. And I think it's these conversations that led to a lot of that.
So it's a real, like, a needs assessment, and it's an iterative process, I would say. Great. How about you, Jenny?
Yeah, and we absolutely do the same thing with learning too, especially like our classroom training. Whenever we have a new course that we're going to teach, we have meet with customers to figure out what are the needs, or do we need a customized class? From the online learning perspective, we do the same thing. We very often, if people come and they say, I need a course on XYZ, sometimes it's taking a step back and saying, okay, so what are you actually trying to achieve? Because sometimes that product or that technology that they might be thinking they need may not be necessarily the best solution. I mean, so at the end of the day, we want our customers to achieve that value, not necessarily have the question answered, which may not have been the right question in the beginning. So the needs and assessment, making sure we're asking the right questions and really meeting the true need behind the scenes, I think is really important.
And I know you've done that with Art. So Art, how does that feed into what your team does?
Yeah, thanks. I think the whole theme of this title, Uncovering and Accelerating Value for Customers, is literally, I think, our mission statement for customer success management. And we do like to collaborate for sure, work with customers, use the qualitative approaches and skills that are needed, but also we're fanatical about trying to find ways to measure with the customer. So if you look at, for example, adoption and value, they're related, but they're different. So if you adopt, you're likely to get value. And even looking at adoption, as we're trying to understand and measure that, it could be basic adoption, meaning, hey, you're just using what you have, table stakes, don't even know if that's good. But then more optimized adoption as well, are you using best practices informed use cases? Are you using what you have in the more ideal way? Are you aware of actually what you have that you're not using that you could use? Are you utilizing education services and what's available for the full partnership, not just the technology part that you implemented and went live with? So we like to look at that part of the equation with customers and also with, imagine, metrics that could be used to show how that's going. But then on the value side, you've got different categories of value that you can imagine calculate how is this integration or these use cases, how is this added outcome value to my organization? So some of those categories we have been working on and learn about, would be technical interoperability. That's a key one based on customer feedback. Another one's efficiency, kind of doing things better, reducing time, reducing cost. Then there's effectiveness, like doing better things that you couldn't do before, new analytics, new capabilities. Maybe you're redistributing effort from one thing that wasn't valuable to a new thing you couldn't do before, and you can quantify that. Then you have, even clinical, improving clinical outcomes through being part of that clinical use case. And then revenue risk compliance could be another category. So these wouldn't apply to all customers, but we try to look at a framework to understand where's the customer at and where they're going to. And they all know this, but perhaps, based on who we work with, they may only have part of the picture as we engage and help them collaborate with them to help expose and kind of put something in place for that I'll talk about perhaps in the next question.
Well, I really like how you were talking about the use cases and sort of pulling out the clinical outcomes in the narrative that exists, because especially as an implementation integration level, sometimes we're down in the nuts and bolts, right? We're getting this work done and you don't see that visibility into sort of the larger picture. And, there was definitely an example of that where we were on site, there was the work list of items, and you were meeting on the project agile and looking at the board. And then the customer was like, well, we have this one scenario, and it wasn't on it wasn't anticipated to be like part of our task list. But when we spoke with them, this turned out to be a use case that was very, very critical to what they considered successful. And instead of saying, well, that's outside of scope, let's look a little further, right? And when we uncovered that, we jumped on something we didn't anticipate having to jump on, worked with the client, and then was able to deliver, this was the discharge authorizations that Blue Cross Blue Shield made. And it turns out that was more valuable to them than the initial kind of assessment. And exactly like we didn't know that was the true use case that they wanted to dig at until we had this collaborative work with the client.
So it's really the uncovering, and looking at it from a different perspective. And for them, success would have been something very different than what you would have done.
What we initially assumed.
So I think there's always that room for conversation, for pulling information out from our customers. And I think that's what your team does a lot of, Art. Right? And Jenny, I think we do too when we're trying to talk. Often people come to learning and they think they know what they need to know. And often there's more that they need to know, and we help to sort of broaden their horizon or give them that perspective. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've done a lot of work. And actually, this is, one of the things in terms of this partnership. When we regularly meet with several of our partners, we've learned a lot from that. And then we can build that back into our services and our processes to even better help our customers. So, for example, hearing we need a very simple process. So, okay, you're going to take we have it outlined for every role through our product set. We have a 1, 2, 3 process. You're going to take a classroom course. You're going to take some online learning. You're going to do a certification exam, and trying to really simplify that down because that meets the needs of what we were hearing. And then now we've built on top of that of having these badges. So we were hearing from partners and from customers of wanting to be able to celebrate the work that they've done. And they're not at the level of our certification badges, but it's a way you can put it on your LinkedIn profile and celebrate the work that you've done. And I'm going to give, she actually was the first person to get one of our badges, our learning badges, so that was a great partnership because she was able to immediately get some recognition for, she already knew a lot of the content, which was helpful.
I'm addicted to learning.
But it also helped us get just immediate feedback and get some traction to celebrate the work that people are doing.
Great. Yeah, and I remember the saying, like, you don't know what you don't know. And it's often helpful for other people to find that. And then to celebrate your successes. And I think we do that with creating structures like certification or badging for people to feel like, yeah, you've achieved something, and that's really important. So I always like stories, like to concretize what we're learning. So I'm curious if any of you have had any stories or examples or tools that you might have used to help uncover and accelerate value with customers. And maybe you don't, but I know you mentioned.
I have many. No, there's actually, your question made me think of a very specific story. So we were working with the team, the customers, and we had just gone live. And they keep in mind that they've been working with IRIS UCR, Unified Care Record, for less than a year this time, starting from zero. They learned HL7 on the job, like within this time period, and they're learning and working with IRIS. And we had a production issue, and it happens. And so there was this team there, and I would say that the team was all the technical heavy hitters. We were all in the room, and I won't name any names specifically, but there was a lot of really high, like heavy hitting expertise in the room, and we're trying to troubleshoot this problem. And then one of the integrators from the customer side, he was watching and listening, and then all of a sudden he chimed in, and he sort of pointed something out that we hadn't caught. And afterwards, I was speaking to him because this was a person, again, that I had been working with him every week, and he started from zero and had been slowly learning the product. And I said, that was a great catch. And he said, it was a tough day. I was there, and he's a senior person in the organization, but new to IRIS. And he said, I felt like I wasn't earning my pay. There was just stuff going wrong, and I didn't know how to fix it. And I was just sitting back. And then when I was watching you guys, and you already found the problem, but I saw something, and I was able to chime in, and he felt good about that, right? He sort of took ownership, and that is exactly what we're hoping to give to the customer. Not just we built this thing at the end of the day, but now you are taking ownership, and you're adopting this technology, and you feel like you have your hands in it and are able to be productive with it. That you're gaining that competency. And that is exactly, that's
accelerating value.
That's accelerating the value and the adoption for the customer.
Great, thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, well, so the badging story was a story, but I'll go with a different kind of example with one of the partners we were meeting with. So we had created a whole journey of how to get up to speed on some of the integration content. And one of the things that we uncovered in one of our check-in calls, and this would not have probably come up without having these calls. We're saying, what are the challenges that you're facing? What are the things that you're looking at maybe creating at your organization to meet the needs? And they're saying, well, you have this path that gets people up to speed on building the integration. But what we're seeing is DTLs specifically, they end up editing them. So if you have to edit a whole bunch of them, you're not going to do that in the DTL editor. You're actually going to do that in the code side of things. And we're like, oh, we hadn't really thought about that next step of how do we accelerate actually updating the DTLs. And so we did a little alignment internally, making sure that that aligned with what product suggested and what our professional service teams suggested, making sure that what the partner was doing was actually best practice as well, because we're not going to just create something based on one opinion. And everybody aligned on that was the best practice of how to actually do that. So they had started creating content on this internally because they wanted to have it. And so they gave it to us, and instead of them having to spend their resources, we created it, and now everyone can benefit from that. So that was a win-win because it helped us, it helped all of our customers, and it helped our partner.
Great. Very illustrative and uncovering.
Yeah.
All right.
Great. Yeah, I can give an example of a tool process that we're using, and then a story that would be more amalgamated from several small examples I'll put together because we've worked with many customers for only a short amount of time. And just for context, imagine this, right? InterSystems technology, you all know the solutions we have, but we're working with customers that Health Connect only, just the engine. Iris for Health, Cache, full-blown UCR, all the modules, some of the modules. So, the product scope variety varies significantly across our customers. And also like who we work with could be very, very technical only. Others could be like technical with their business partners and maybe analytics involved. So you can appreciate the range we have here. But the tool I want to mention to you, the approach I want to mention to you is what we're calling a mutual success plan. And I think anybody that's like a program manager person kicking off implementations would relate to this, like folks in the audience here. It's got a similar characteristic, but it could apply literally to any part of a customer journey. And I'll try to give some examples. But imagine a way to frame in a simple way from the customer's view, like outside in, not inside out from us, but from their view, for this time period they're working on some initiatives, what are their goals, objectives, what are the key milestones they're trying to manage against, including ours, but even their own, risks that are obvious that they want to make sure they mitigate or kind of know they're coming, and then success criteria items, and what are the measurements for those, even before and after, or percentage or quantification. So imagine having all of that. That's something we call a mutual success plan. Obviously, it requires collaboration, and imagine a range of customers and where they are. What could apply to them. To a action engine customer could be very technical and very detailed versus like a UCR customer. So we start with that. Again, customer could be day one, easier to work on this because they probably have a starting point, or it could be like day one of year 10, where we don't know what they're working on. So the stories here come from us engaging with customers and putting in place this approach, first letting them know how it looks, giving them some examples, and then as we talk about the approach, they start mentioning things that we didn't know. Oh, as a matter of fact, we're working on a modernization, automation stage of our journey, and that involves Iris upgrading, but also other stuff. Right, we didn't know that. Then we find out there's a key milestone they have to meet internally to decommission some things that are happening maybe X months from now that, again, we didn't know. So then, we frame a mutual success plan around that area for that customer and try to identify, well, what are the key outcomes you're trying to achieve on this? So far, we're getting more tactical outcomes like cycle time, hitting key milestones, downtime reduction that's relevant to that particular part of that project phase, internal ticket reduction, but also like potential new use cases that their bosses are waiting for at the tail end of that of this sort of phase of this journey. So those are some examples of kind of what we've done and what this could look like. And in this discussion collaboration process, we've also identified longtime customer. By the way, they didn't realize that Iris could do the following things that are available to them, but they just, were so busy and they just took it for granted. So able to give a refresher. New team members coming on board, new partner with their team members. Well, need a new learning path refresher or a new learning path completely. So things like that have come up that we've uncovered and then kind of put together with, all right, what do we do next? And have that be part of the mutual success plan, but also in how we engage going forward. So
it sounds like you have a lot of analytics and a lot of metrics that you put into it. So in Jeff Fried's talk this morning, he asked the audience, how do you define innovation? Not everybody really knew. Very few hands went up. But he said something, and people often give the definition, well, you know it when you see it. So when I look at success, I think the same thing. So how do we know customers are successful? So I'm curious, like, how do you, is it just measuring it, or do you just know? Like, what do you see that would say customers are successful? And how do you know that we've helped accelerate it? Tough question.
I'm gonna take a stab at this. I don't remember this being exactly in the list, but I'm gonna go for this. I think this. I thought you were gonna ask the innovation question. I was scared, and now I'm more scared. But I think when you're dealing with the customer, right, or when you're working, why do I say deal like it's so impersonal? When you're working with the customer, how do you know that you're successful? How do you know? For me, and again, this might be a different measure, and I think this is why I propose this talk. I don't. If you're waiting for that task to complete, if you're waiting for go live, that is a metric. That's very important.
Sure,
that is
sure.
things that people want.
It's a goal.
But you're looking for a success metric long before that. And if you're not looking at those metrics before that, you're sort of missing the boat. For instance, right at the beginning, the customer has all these questions that they're not able to answer, at least when they started. And when they started working with Iris, when they started working with some of the tools, they were then early on, before delivery, able to start answering questions to their providers and their partners and their participants, and sort of getting the value right away. And when that came about, they were able to take ownership, and that was sort of the first moment when they said that, like, we don't know the whole picture, but we're now gaining competency in this first part. And that is able to immediately go back. And I'm going to give like I am a techie, by the way. I'm going to give a hard example of this. Is within the first month of engagement with the customer, and this is when go live was a good 9 months away, they were able to do some HL7 profiling, and they were able to find the values that were relevant to their practice and to their use case. And then they were able to independently go back to the participants and say, you're not sending us these key fields that we require for this use case. So in a way, they became educated in the product. They were able to educate their participants. And then the key question, how long would this have taken you without this product? And the answer was, a month. Like, we were weeks and weeks and weeks of like looking through all this data, and we were able to do this within an hour and turn it around and get a response. And then from that moment, like, even though again, go live was a good 9 months away, we started to build that trust. And I think I may have lost track of the initial question, but I think that's how I knew that they were getting value out of this.
So there's really signs along the way, like you knew you were moving towards
And
success.
earlier than the end game. There is
Perfect.
wins along the way.
Thank you.
Yep. And I think that's a great, like, $1 million question. You know, I would say, just like philosophically, for InterSystems should be outside in. You know, what is the customer's definition of success? Not necessarily ours. We should be within it, but customer view is important. Another aspect is the definition of success for a customer is going to vary over time. I mean, year 3, what is it that year versus the first year? So these things can be dynamic, but the customer should have a view of that we should understand. And a couple of ways we're using to check in and see what it would be, eventually being able to measure it. One is like within the mutual success plan process and kind of what's documented. Another way is that we also do what we call value assurance check-ins along the way. Imagine doing those later enough that we're actually checking in on what do those metrics look like from an actual standpoint versus what you targeted, and help the customer make sure they're understanding and managing that within their broader organization. A third way we use is during what we're calling periodic business reviews. You're live 6 months, a year, et cetera, a lot of data accumulated. It's an operational, strategic kind of review that also has a reporting out of what's happened over the course of time with metrics, results, use cases, both from our perspective, but also the customer presenting back to us. And then another way, it's more like a strategic thermometer check. We just started the first time around Q4 of last year. We rolled out what we called a periodic voice of the customer survey. Periodic meaning, okay, we're going to do it more than once. Could be two times a year, maybe 3 times. That's a message to InterSystems as well as to customers. It's not a one and done thing. And in that survey, it wasn't complicated. In the survey, we captured 6 KPIs as well as qualitative feedback. 2 of the KPIs we captured were about, hey, customer, although we may not know the value that you sought out to get from us in the first place, are you on track to achieving it? Or are you on track to achieving it and you're trying to do more? Or actually, are you off track and it's kind of red, or you don't know yet because you're in the middle of implementation? So we got feedback and scores on that. And then the next question was, speaking of value that we may not know about, what are the value levers that you're trying to achieve or have already achieved? And this time around, we gave a choice, 12 or 13 choices ranging from the clinical area all the way down to like technical interoperability, efficiency. And that, that first time around gave us a reading of customers are getting value, but it's kind of in this area and we should know about that. And how do we, help them go forward? And also next time around, do the same kind of survey and see what they say for how they've been progressing on that. And then I guess the last way could be, as we're interacting with customers, if we see something, observe some opportunity, some gap, some issue between the CSM, the account executive, the learning services team, sales engineer, then we'll call it out, put something together, and go back with a recommendation, kind of anytime, any place.
With learning, there's this concept of Kirkpatrick's levels of evaluation. And one of the first levels is the idea of how many people are doing the training and actually going through it. That's an easy one. We can capture that, and we look at the data and things that are not performing or not many people are interested in it. We get rid of it. It's clutter. It's not helping anybody. So I would say from one level, this is, I'm going to take your question and break it into two. This is like, how do we know whether our content is performing and useful? And then the other one is, how do I know whether the partnership is useful, right? And so this is from like the content side of things. So we really look at the data to really see what is helping. Now we don't have, if you look at Kirkpatrick's, the more useful thing is actually having the business impact. And that's really what we want at the end of the day. We don't want just people to learn and not use it. That's not helpful. It just wastes people's time. So I'm really pushing into that and seeing, are we seeing the impact that we're trying to see? Are people more effective at implementing or at setting up an integration or at being able to set up do the architecture side of things? And that's really hard for us to get because it's not our data. We don't own it. And so where we need to get the feedback from that is through these partnerships and seeing like through Chi, like are your customers able to get up and running quickly? Are they effective and self-sustaining at this point because the training has been useful, or through surveys and conversation? So if you see something in our catalog that doesn't seem accurate, or please tell us, because we need that feedback. That is super, super helpful for us. But that's ultimately what we drive toward, is helping our customers be effective and successful as quick as possible. So then it brings me to that partnership, whether the partnership is effective. And part of that, I would say, would be finding these areas of alignment and collaboration and connection where we can reduce the work and have that mutual beneficial success.
So what I'm hearing, it's really important, one, to understand what success is. Mm-hmm. And we don't necessarily define it. Often it's our customers, but then it's also that partnership. Like maybe the customers are being successful, but is the partnership? And how do we measure that? And it seems like we have a lot of ways that we measure, and it's not just observing, but there's a lot of techniques out there that we're happy to share, with anybody out here if you want to know more about, Kirkpatrick's or the things that we set up for value assessment measurement. So there seems to be a lot of challenges that customers face. So what would you say is one of the biggest challenges that customers have to access value or to accelerate value? And I'd like to invite folks like you, if you have questions, you're more than welcome to raise your hand, or if you'd like to share like what your biggest challenges, on accelerating your value, we'd love to hear that, and maybe we can respond to that. How's that sound?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges that I see right at the beginning is if there are individuals wanting to get up to speed, not having the executive support to get the time to actually learn and train. And so one of the things that I will coach certain people on is to be able to figure out, okay, how do you engage with those people and share that return on investment? And how do you get that buy-in right at the beginning, making sure that you can carve out time that may not be billable time. This is for our partners in particular. But yeah, at the end of the day, if you don't have people who are trained in doing this effectively, you're going to end up having to redo things. And it's not a good use of time. So we need that executive support to be able to carve out time for training.
And one of the major retention factors for people to stay at companies is the ability to learn. Like if your company promotes learning, because we face that all the time, that people don't have time to learn. But young folks, and actually anybody in their career, if they're not learning, they may
Young
look
at heart.
elsewhere. I'm sorry?
Young heart.
Young at heart. How about you, Chi?
I say the biggest challenge, and this is for learning and for technology, is I would say the complexity avalanche, right? There's so much now. And I think being able to focus and narrow down what you pay attention to becomes the problem. Now the information is out there and you don't know what to ignore. You don't know what path to take, especially when you first are given this huge tool set and then a whole array of business level requirements and then a whole array of standards and other requirements. And so I think part of the job is not telling people the right answer, but teaching and guiding, right? Those little signposts. How do you focus? What should you focus on? To be able to pick out what's relevant and what's not. And I think that that's something that we've had conversations on, like the training is wonderful, but how could we help people, especially new to the training and new to the product? How do you focus in so you can find your answers? And it's not just having the right answer, find your path to the answer. And I think, some great developments have come out of those conversations we've had.
Yeah, it's teamwork. It's that coaching and mentoring, that relationship you have.
And I think, Chi, didn't you do a podcast with our team about some of these best practices?
I did. That was a while ago.
Yeah, so that was really cool too, of like going one step deeper of not just the content, but like the best practices, right? And uncovering those things.
Yeah,
So I
great.
imagine,
Yeah.
from customer success management, you must have some thoughts on that.
Challenges for sure.
Yeah.
Just examples of challenges. One we saw come back in that survey I mentioned to you was this is more internal, where customers were getting value, albeit maybe not broad enough for what we would want them to, but we didn't necessarily know that, and we should know that. Another challenge I see is many customers are very technically focused, rightly so, working in integration engineering and maybe not with a broader team. And the challenge of, taking for granted, what is it that group is doing to activate some benefit, either in the operation or downstream, and sort of not having a view of what value that's already adding. So it's there, but no one's really been asked to put it together. So we've seen that come up as well as a sort of key challenge, which also points to an opportunity on both sides.
I always want to make sure that we leave enough time for questions. So does anybody have questions? We're happy to address those.
Thank you. How does the customer success department compare to the sales engineer role? So I obviously have a relationship with Andrew Aho and his team, and so how does it differ?
Yeah, sure. Like I was mentioning in the beginning, the customer success management function is a newer one for InterSystems, but the way we put it together was sort of studying and accounting for what does the account executive do already, and many of the account executive responsibilities have been on managing a current customer ongoing, which they could still do, but they don't have to do the same way they were before. We could cover that, and they could just rely on the CSM for that part of it. Sales engineers cover a lot of ground, as you know, before, during, and forever with customers. So if anything, we're partnering more with sales engineers, on current customers and kind of letting the AE become aware of what we're doing. So we're kind of adding to the overall account team. And then, we're also covering a lot of ground when it comes to technically program managing a customer situation. Something could be off the rails. Well, we have to be able to be on top of that and sort of program manage that for the customer and internal across all the pieces and WRC, iService, whatever's going on, product, to bring that together as well. So it's sort of in that area.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
I think when you work with InterSystems, it's a team, whether you're a partner or a customer, and you get all of us. And the importance is that we are always communicating with each other, to help customers. So, and Andrew is in Australia, right? That you work with Australia. So I'm not sure if you've reached out with Australia yet, but I'm sure you will. Other questions?
You're focused on customer success, right? Yes. Success, we take positive metrics, we take how do you help the partner and the customer when we're starting to not see success, or the customer's definition for success changes halfway through the project, or or how can you facilitate that, or your organization?
Right.
I
Right.
mean, and I do want to say,
Right.
the training's getting better for years, so that's
Yep.
huge. That's a big, somebody's been doing health share for a long time. I can tell you that every year it gets better. That's a big thing as well. So
Yeah, great question. I think it's more like not if, it's like when those things happen, right? I would say if a customer success manager is with the customer, they're with that account team, but also they're working on the ground, and could be during implementation, or could be well after, could be with a partner that's doing the implementation, or partner with us, or partner only with the customer. So all those use cases. So I think just having, being able to be involved in the early stage to understand and set expectations, and then have something in place to say, hey, need to do a checkpoint. Something has changed. Here's some of the facts behind it. Let's sort of do a pre-review. This may require escalation, and here's some options, like you would do if you're like program manager of that situation, but in partnership with all the stakeholders, versus like as a silo. Sometimes that requires customer, multiple customer discussions, like come to the woodshed, or whatever it is. So those kind of things, I think we would be involved in anyway for any customer journey. And they, journeys go, through ups and downs, and also, usually, or not usually, but a lot of times, let's say we're talking to the folks on the ground doing the work, things could be okay, fine. But then if we have an interaction with the stakeholders or the manager that's involved, but also they've got a bigger portfolio, things are not fine. And we only found out by accident. So how do we know about that more systematically and kind of get a course correction in place on both sides? And we do some of that during what, the value assurance check-in is also, it's a way to do a mutual, let's do a quick review of kind of how we're both doing on both sides or all three sides, and whatever comes out of it, there could be actions on any one of those three sides to kind of get a course correction in place.
Communication is a huge part. Any other questions folks have?
And there is like a project, it's something that just came up recently too, where we identified it could be a challenge in a place where we need training. And so we're working with your team a little bit on how do we help every customer. So if there was a challenge that was raised, and I say that to say, like, talk to your account executive. I've been coached on what word I should be using there. Talk to your account executive, your customer service manager, because you might not be the only one running into the issue. And we want to, from that, be able to help everybody.
Even in that example, probably you're referring to your customer we've had for a long time, work with partners. They happen to be working with a new partner that we didn't necessarily know about. It wasn't triggered to us, but we found that out, and then kind of accelerated their pathway back into learning paths, and that helped them get up and running for a project for the customer. And that was kind of reported on by them, but also by us at a review, which wasn't even on the radar screen, 4 or 5 weeks before that. So, yeah.
That was like in the keynote this morning, how one hospital shared how well they did something with other hospitals so that they could, help them solve a problem that they were encountering and get things done more quickly. So again, it's sharing knowledge, communicating, et cetera, et cetera. So before we let you go, we have just a couple of minutes left. What would you say is the one thing that you would like our folks to walk away with from today's session? What would you say is the one most important thing that you'd want them to take away? Who would like to start?
It's never too late to have an outcome-focused success plan. Have one in place, have the metrics, and be able to understand and measure how you're doing against those along the way.
Great.
With collaboration, of course.
Collaboration. So I would say, let's all be part of one ecosystem where we can empower each other. Come and talk with us if you're wanting an onboarding plan, but it's a mutually beneficial thing. Come being ready to teach us, and we'll do whatever we can to help you as well.
Yeah, mine is similar. It's not a one-way process, and technology is not a silo. It really never forget that there's a human behind it, and that reach out. Right. The more you learn, and it keeps on growing.
Great. and important to reach out. Please reach out. So I'd like to thank our panelists today. If you would give them up a nice round of applause.